Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This webinar is entitled How to Thrive in Your Home Office. My name is Josie. I am WESC's Marketing Advisor. Before we begin here, could I have everybody comment in that chat box and let me know if you can hear me okay? If you are having any audio issues, there is a phone number listed in your email that you can use to follow along with the presentation today. Just let some comments roll in here. Looks good. Perfect. All right, looks like everyone can hear me okay, so I will get started. For those of you who don't know, our WESC webinars are typically offered once a month, but we've bumped up this frequency during COVID-19, and we're now offering these webinars on a weekly basis, so every Wednesday. Our webinars are recorded and can be found on our small business resources page at wesc.ca/services/resources. As I mentioned, today our topic is how to thrive in your home office, and today's presentation is presented by Stacy Padini. I hope I'm saying that right, Stacy, sorry, of Techno Unlimited, and Ann Croft of 1080 Architecture Planning and Interiors. If attendees have any questions as we go through the presentation, please write them in that chat box on the corner of your screen, and I will let Stacy and Leanne decide if they'd like to address them as we go or tackle them at the end of the presentation. Stacy and Leanne, thanks for joining us today, and I will hand it over to the two of you to begin the presentation.
Thanks so much, Josie, and to all of the attendees today for signing up. Really appreciate you inviting us through our Dealer Concept 3 Business Interiors in Regina. So my portion of the presentation, I'm going to just talk about some tips to make working from home successful for you. This was a situation that came about fairly quickly, and we all had to adapt and be agile. And we understand that probably we have a good variety of people who maybe had home-based business. So this was really very little change for you, other than maybe having your children home with you all day. Or perhaps you already had a great deal of flexibility in your work and had some ability to work from home, and that was my situation. Or for some organizations, we really saw that despite the advances in technology and adaptive work strategies, flexible work strategies, it was a big struggle for them. So we're going to look through a few different tips here and cover, first of all, one of the most important things to consider, regardless of where you're working, whether it's in your office, at your desk, in your home office, or thanks to flexible work policies and technology. I'm actually on vacation at a fishing resort in Ontario right now. So a couple of key things to remember. We're going to take a look at ergonomics, just a quick reminder of what good ergonomics are and how to make yourself comfortable as much as you can in any setting. But also some of the other things that were a struggle for all of us, like establishing our routines and understanding that our behaviors really are key to having a successful and productive work from home strategy. And for those of you that are employers, also what kind of policies do we need to consider to make it as easy and as comfortable as possible for our employees, but still to ensure productivity and that the goals of the organization are met. And then towards the end of the presentation, after Leanne has finished her portion as well, we're happy to take any of your questions. Just type them into the chat box. Okay. So first, let's take a look at the ergonomics of working. So this is just a quick little, some kind of fun tips and tricks out there to remind us of some of the basics. This is a little bit cheeky. And again, it's just a bit of a call out to some of the things that we've all struggled with in the last 4.5 months as we've had to shift to working remotely. But some really important things to have that seamless work from home experience is to change your posture at least once an hour. In an ideal setting, it might mean using your stand-up desk, but at home, it might mean going to work at your kitchen counter for a while to give your back a break from sitting in stagnantly in a chair. And I think it's as important, especially while watching Tiger King on Netflix. Was not a fan myself. I'm not sure if it's still the hot series or not. We've probably moved on to something else. But also one of the things that I personally struggled with, even though I live and talk and breathe the world of work all the time, is a lot of employers who aren't comfortable with work from home strategy or think it's because their employees aren't actually going to be sitting at their desk working while they're at home. But for me, I actually found that I was much more likely to stay stagnant at my desk and had to remind myself to get up and walk around and change my position every now and then. So certainly conference calls, which we've all done a lot of, although they've all changed to Zoom or Hangouts or whatever, a little bit harder to walk around with your screen in front of you. But a call is a fantastic way to, take opportunity to move around a little bit. And then, of course, we'll take a look at some different settings that you can create in your own home and some just general tips in ergonomics and how to stay healthy and productive. So you can practice mindful ergonomics anywhere, and it is really quite important. Just some of the basics. I realize we can. This is probably, I don't know how small this is on your screen, but if you remember nothing else about your a good ergonomic position while working, this is all based on using technology. So we're in front of screens every day. It's all about the eyes. Basically, what you want to have, just like we see in these two illustrations, whether you're standing or if you're seated, is that your eyes are level with about the top inch or so, like roughly where your top taskbar is of your screen. And that's to keep your spine and your neck in a neutral position. So you're not tilting your head up or tilting your head downwards, putting additional strain on your neck and shoulders. So that is really where it comes into importance about making sure that monitor or that screen is at the right height. You guys can't see it, but right now I have my laptop actually propped up on my laptop bag, which is a bit angled just to lift it a little bit off the table surface. So it was a better height for me to use. Again, with keyboards, whether you're using a keyboard tray or keying right on your desk surface, you want a 90-degree or greater angle on your elbow to make sure you're, again, not causing too much strain on your shoulders and lifting them up. And the same thing with your knees when you're seated. You want that 90-degree angle or your legs slightly extended in front of your chair. There's a few other tips there. We're happy to share, sort of a little bit more information. This is a handout we can send out if you wanted to have a few more of the ergonomic pointers. So let's talk about the ideal setup, which is not something that we all have right now. However, what can happen is if you don't have my apologies, new to this webinar format, I see I skipped a slide. So this is just a little fun. Some images of some very creative and adaptive home office setups during the pandemic. A couple of these images are from my Technion peers. We were all sharing our setups the first few weeks we were at home. So some of them not too bad. And a couple of them were found on Twitter, people sharing their ideas and perhaps bemoaning a little bit that they missed their proper workstation in the office. My favorite, of course, is the stand-up desk created with an ironing board. Let's take a look at, what an ideal setup is and then how we can adapt our home office setup to provide you some good ergonomic posture. So in an ideal setup, one of the number one things that we're going to want is a task chair with ergonomic features. So if I would say that if you have money to invest in just maybe a small portion, if you don't already have a task chair while you're working from home, this would be the number one item if you have limited resources and aren't able to give yourself a full proper home office setup, because you can then adapt that task chair to a variety of different surfaces. So the very basic adjustments that you would want would be seat height and seat depth adjustment, because those are all about the back and the knees and making sure you're maintaining that proper angle. Ideally, you also want an adjustable arm on that. You want tension adjustment on the back as well. If it's at all possible to have a height adjustable desk in your home office, that is pretty much the standard now. Leanne, I think, do you do much planning of offices anymore that don't include height adjustable surfaces?
No, they're pretty much all including height adjustable at this point. Absolutely.
Right. It's gone far beyond a trend now, and with employee wellness and also the relation of employee well-being to productivity and meeting organizational goals, there's so much data out there supporting all of that. It has become a standard in most offices. Really nice amenity to have. And there are some very affordable options out there, both electric or manual height adjustment desks. The other thing is you want to have ideally a second monitor. If you're working off of a laptop, it's to prevent eye strain and eye fatigue, to have a slightly larger monitor, ideally mounted on a monitor arm. And when that's on a height adjustable desk, it's important that that monitor arm also be fully adjustable, because the ratio of that eye level, if you remember from a few slides ago, keeping your eyes level and your head in a neutral position, that ratio of your when you're standing versus seating actually changes a little bit as far as the monitor height from your work surface. So you want to be able to adjust that height if you're standing or if you're seated. And then, of course, even if you have really great natural light coming into wherever it is in your home that you're working, it's a good idea to have either a desk lamp or at least a floor lamp nearby for those cloudy or gray days, or perhaps some of those later days, which this time of year, I hope nobody's working quite that late into the dark. Now let's take a look at the adapted setup. And this is really more the reality of what most of us have been living with the last 4.5 to 5 months. It does, it was a pretty quick change, and people had to shift pretty quickly, even within, this is actually my own home office. So although I work for a furniture manufacturer, I do have a really great chair, a Technion chair. But I do have a fixed height glass top desk there and some odds and sods of furniture. So for me, that really important piece, again, was the task chair with full ergonomic features. Then with a fixed height surface desk, whether it's a desk or your kitchen or dining room table, most of those are in around that 29 to 30 inch height that is seen as being ideal for doing task-based technology work. But then you don't have that height adjustment of your keying surface, and certainly on a glass desk, I couldn't add a keyboard tray. I'm 5 feet tall, so one of my challenges is to have my chair low enough to have my legs in the proper position. Then the desk is far too high, and I was doing this to type. So you'll notice there's a plastic file box on the floor below my desk that has adapted and become a footrest. So a stack of books, whatever that may be, if it's a quick change that you need to make, it's important to maintain that posture while you're seated, and make sure that you're not hunching your shoulders up or extending your legs too far, putting strain on your lower back. And then I did have a second monitor. We had some extra monitors in our showroom. So I brought one home. This one is on its own stand. So it is actually on a stack of cookbooks to bring it up to the proper height for me. We had a little bit of debate. Lisa from Concept 3 Art Dealer is probably cringing a little bit right now as she's looking at the slides. She's joined us for this presentation. But the reality is it is an adapted setup, and it's helping you maintain those healthy ergonomics and prevent fatigue and shoulder and neck strain and pain. So and then there's some added features. This has now gone on for quite some time. Most of us, if we have an office to work on, have started going back into the office over the last month as our local governments put us into different phases of reopening. Certainly I've done that. But the reality is we are going to have resurgences. We probably, if you work in a larger office, are not going to be able to come back to full capacity. So you may have people staggered. You may be asked to work from home a certain number of days a week. So you want to maintain that setup, and it's going to be with us for some time. And honestly, I think this was a bit of a movement. Flexible work and flexible work locations is something that we in the industry have been talking about for a long time, and the benefits of it. And if there's some silver linings to come out of this situation, I think it's for more people to realize that it is really possible to support a remote workforce healthy. So there's some additional elements. If you're going to set up that home office for quite some time, whether you have a room that you're able to dedicate or just a corner of a larger space in your home, that will help make you feel like you're settled in to the space. And some of those things are elements of biophilic design, which means just bringing in a little bit of nature to the space. So whether that's making sure you have a plant nearby, I actually had a little potted flower on my desk, or having a view of the outdoors, or even images of nature, are all very conducive to providing you with a focused environment that really allows you to calmly get through your day. Again, good natural lighting, so try to be by a window whenever you can. And again, supplement that desk lamp. I know we mentioned it before, but proper lighting is really key, again, to preventing fatigue throughout the day. So that's kind of looking at our home office setups and some quick things that we can do to adapt to make sure that we're comfortable. But what about our routines and our habits? Some people are quite comfortable adapting to working from home, and some people really struggle with it. And there's certainly no shortage of distractions when you're working from home. So this again these are all Technion pets. It was one of the things that we were all sharing with each other when the first few weeks that we were working from home. And, whether somebody is, just being your kids, your spouse, or your new furry coworker that's staring at you for a walk, a snack, or maybe a belly rub. You do need to set some boundaries and establish a routine while you're working from home, just like you would when you're working in the office. And those routines and daily rituals really help prepare us mentally and physically for the day ahead of us. So this is my cat, by the way, but a couple of tips to manage those distractions and help you set some boundaries is to plan out your workday, just like you always did when you were going into your office. So a lot of people start out their day with that email triage, if that's what you did, and grouping things, tasks into certain time slots of the day. If you're a person that likes to do those to-do lists to check things off, there's no reason why we can't continue to do that in our home offices, even if you're sitting on your couch, to get that task done. Again, we've already spoken about the importance of dedicating a room or a corner to work and to nothing but work. And that's not only to allow you to continue to be productive, but it's also to make sure that you don't have too much overlap of your personal and your work life. You do still want to try and maintain work-life balance, and that's actually in some ways has been better working from home, but in some ways has also presented a whole new set of challenges. So it might mean you need to provide diversions for others. I certainly know my coworker in Winnipeg has a 5-year-old at home and spent a lot of time and effort in structured activities and changed her own working hours as well, to be able to address, making sure she had that time to focus on a video meeting or on a call or had a deadline for a task to get done. In this instance, my first few weeks at home, my cat thought it was great. He was constantly on my desk, annoying me. So I ended up, and if anybody has a cat, you know that they will lay on any papers that are spread about. So I had a false pile of work papers set to one side, finally with some pens he could happily bat off the desk. And that actually worked. And after about 2 weeks of being home, he totally got over it and only came to see me when he was hungry at the end of the day. The other thing is to dedicate a space. Leanne's chuckling. She's got lots of diversions at home, I know. So with how many children, Leanne, are you living with? 3, and one is less than a year old.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll let you comment on how you manage that a little bit.
Oh, there, my audio. Yeah, I was going to say my number one tip for where to set up your home office is any space with a door. So that's a component of it. But yeah, no, I think it is definitely about structuring that time. And I know for us, what we did, especially when the kids were still in school, was set aside times where letting your office know I'm not available during this window of time, and just having that communicated to the other people you're working with, so those expectations are clear. I think everybody has been so adaptable to this, to working from home and the flexible work environments, but the key is really around communication with your team.
Absolutely. Those are great tips too. And just as it is as important to dedicate that space to working, make sure you dedicate a good chunk of your home to not working. While it's fine to wander into that kitchen if you want to take advantage of those counters for stand-up work, or maybe you have a document to read and would prefer to do that in a more comfortable chair or in your living room, you don't want your work creeping into your entire household. Again, maintaining that work-life balance is really quite critical. So we have dedicated a space to, we got a little bit of a space to not working as well. So this is Jackson, again, the cat, and this is our screen porch at the back of the house. And I assure you, no work happened in there that day. So the other thing is about routines that have changed, that we're forced to change, and not just necessarily your work routine throughout the day. You want to keep as much as your daily routine as possible. So if you picked up your puppuccino from your local Starbucks on the way to the office every morning, try to find a way to still do that. Whether it means getting in your car and going through that drive-through, or maybe you switch coffee shops if there's one that's walking distance within your home office. Going for that short walk and getting your coffee is actually a great way to, just establish the mindset and get into that work mode for the day. A lot of us probably mentally prepared for a day on the drive into the office as well. So again, those parts of your routine are really as critical to keep as anything else. And of course, I'm sure everybody's heard this tip by now, is don't forget to get dressed appropriately every workday, at least from the waist up. The number of video meetings that we're on right now, I'm sure everyone's seen on Twitter and other forms of social media, all of the Zoom meeting faux pas that have happened. But I just found that it also helped me get in the right mindset. I think the first week I was at home, I decided I wasn't going to shower until maybe after lunch. And I did put some yoga pants on. I didn't stay in my pajamas. And then my boss was texting me for an emergency Zoom meeting. So it was, luckily, she's very forgiving. That also helped me decide that I was going to get dressed every day properly. We got just a bit of lag, I think, here. The other things are your routines with your coworkers. Now, this one has become definitely a little bit more challenging. So this is a really important part of our in-office routines that many of us have been missing. And those are the opportunities to connect with our coworkers and our teammates, whether they were planned and scheduled or those unplanned collisions that happens where sometimes ideas get shared. But just consider that if you regularly shared breaks with a colleague, coffee breaks with a colleague, maybe somebody in a different department even, make sure you still take that time to schedule with them. So with a virtual coffee break, even though it means that spontaneity has been removed, it's still very beneficial to set aside that time to connect face to face, as much as we probably all have a little bit of Zoom fatigue. These types of connections really are so critical for remaining engaged and for collaboration, but also for team building. So Leanne, I don't know, did you do regular kind of video check-ins with your staff during this time?
Yeah, we did. Regular coffee break actually that we scheduled throughout the week, where everyone would get together and different people led it. And we did sort of the MTV Cribs thing where we looked in everyone's fridges one day and had some games and things like that. So people got really creative with it. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, our team did a couple of lunches where we just do a big Google Hangout and you could just pop in and out throughout the day. And we may have done a virtual cocktail hour or two as well. So at the end of the day. So those are, again, just some of the things about routine and habit in your own behaviors. But looking at this in a much broader scale, again, when we talk about whether you're an employer or an employee or an individual, what can I do as an organization and as an individual, maybe home-based worker? So I just want to share a little bit of the information out there. There has already been a plethora of research done on the success of work from home during the pandemic. One of the most reliable sources I find is Global Workplace Analytics. So they completed a work from home experience survey probably about 6 weeks into the pandemic and published the findings in May. So these numbers have evolved a little bit with more recent studies, but I find they've only fluctuated a bit. But pre-pandemic, just to kind of give you a snapshot of the corporate world of work, 31% of employees in a corporate environments work from home on a regular basis, but that jumped up to 88% during the pandemic. So about 68% of respondents felt that they were overall quite successful working from home. And while 72% of workers were satisfied with their performance at the office, 71% were just as satisfied with their work performance and activity on average while working from home. So really not a big change there. People felt like even if it was in a different way, they were still able to get done what they needed to get done. But what's really interesting, just a slight difference here, 70% of managers say that work from home has been either the same or better for their team's work performance on average. And I think one of the key reasons for that, particularly if we talk about the open office, which has a lot of fantastic benefits, both from a facility side, but also from the human aspect of work. But it can sometimes be challenging to get those heads down focused tasks completed. And one of the things that's come out of this, so whether you've struggled or loved it, now you're dreading having to go back into the office, you were in a situation where choice was removed. And choice is really, when we talk about this being successful and working for everybody, choice is really the most important thing. So in an ideal world, the respondents of this survey said that working from home 2 to 3 days per week would be kind of that sweet spot for them, where they would have that time to get focused task work done and maintain a little bit more work-life balance by saving on the commute and that sort of thing, but still have the opportunity to be in the office to interact with their teammates and their colleagues and collaborate and in a bigger way. So a couple of other key factors that were driving to success, and if you can see that graphic, you'll see that the number one, and we've talked about it already, is the importance of routine. It's self-discipline. Again, planning your day. That was leaps and bounds above all of the other factors. But some of the additional interesting findings, certainly technology was the next thing. Work from home well-being, again, so having that proper work-life balance that actually had positive effect for a lot of people. If you've had experience working from home already, obviously you had some success as well. And then technology and the physical workplace, so again, that setup were some of the other leading factors for a successful work from home strategy. So I think going forward, as we look at possibly reducing density in our workplaces and supporting a mobile workforce, I think there will be a little bit of a shift in how organizations approach those things. So a couple of interesting facts. Everybody talks about generations in the workplace. And you'd think perhaps that the opportunity to work mobily or remotely all the time would be more suited to the younger generations. But this survey actually found that boomers and Gen X were the most successful generationally. About 73 and 72% respectively were successful working from home. But Gen Y and Gen Z, so that the youngest of our workers, actually struggled quite a bit, with 59 and 44% of respondents saying that they were successful from working from home. And that could be a variety of reasons. They were kind of drivers of the social workspace and would miss that opportunity to engage with their workers. They're more used to an environment where it's more of a team-based or activity-based style of work rather than a task-based style of work. And also just not probably feeling quite as experienced and secure in their careers and in their knowledge base. So it's something to consider with how you manage your teams or your workers when you're doing the work from home experience. I'm going to speed things up here and turn things over to Leanne. But, you know, is work from home really working? And here's what you can do. Again, just to recap, for individuals, again, whether you're a self-employed person who's always working from home or you're working for somebody, is maintain that self-discipline and accountability. Make sure you put some effort into creating a productive home work environment. Sharpen your technology skills. It's not something we touched on a lot, but a lot of people have struggled with the video technology and adapting even to file storage digitally, companies and individuals. So that's really important. And again, maintaining that work-life balance. And as an organization or as leaders of groups of people, if you're managing people, make sure that you set expectations that are clear, that the work goals haven't changed. Provide appropriate resources, though, to support those things as much as you're able to, again, on a quick turn. That might mean, allowing people to take some office supplies home. If they are able to take any technology home with them, that's another thing. And start building that technology foundation. If you didn't have it already to support a mobile workforce, I think the degree that we all work from home, even once we have a vaccine and aren't concerned about resurgences of shutdown, I think we're all going to be working from home to a greater degree going forward. And support really good work from home policies. So acknowledge that work-life balance is done, is a big part of it, and that as long as the goals and the expectations are set and deadlines are set, being a little bit more flexible and understand that the work maybe doesn't need to happen in such a strict window of 9 to 5. Some work might get done from 7 till 9, and then there's maybe a few hours that's personal time, and then the rest of that day is spread throughout any time throughout that day. And that's a really key thing to reinforce with your teams, that you understand that it's acceptable and that they understand they have the flexibility to do. And just a few quick quotes, which I found were really interesting. I mentioned a lot of companies previously have been fighting this and saying there's no way we could possibly support a mobile workforce. And I think, a couple of these things, was the comment from the chief people officer of Zillow, who says, our bias against work from home has been completely exploded. They discovered that their employees actually did stay engaged while working from home, and the company was not seeing any drop in productivity. And it's something to keep in mind as business owners and as people working in the corporate world. We know that the rate of change has always been very quick, and to remain successful, you need to be adaptable, and that's no different in this situation. So that's it for my portion. I'm going to pass things over to Leanne now to talk a little bit more about how things have shifted in the corporate work environment and the physical environment itself.
Great, thanks, Lucy. So what I wanted to talk about was really about what's changed and what are some thoughts on the post-COVID office as we start to move back into the workplace as things open up. And likely you're experiencing this with your staff and people in your offices already. But what are the things that are changing? What do you need to do to create a safe work environment for people to work together within? So we're seeing a lot of different trends starting to emerge and different things that you can start to consider. One of them is really around density. Over the last number of years, we've seen a move to far more dense work environments, but that really isn't possible when you start to think about how can you maintain 6 feet between your staff, or are you having to put up physical screens or barriers? But density is a real big part of this. And so you can start to consider using every other desk, or start to create plans that when you're looking at your teams, how can people work together in a safe way? Staggered work schedules are something that we're seeing more and more. I know at our office, that's something that we've employed. We've got a very complicated color-coded schedule with different people working, whether it's mornings or afternoons. And it's really about creating that, the density in the space that is allowing us to have more space together. So it's not really about having the space between people maintained at the correct distance. So we're trying to bring everyone together in a way that people can work together, but maintain some people at home and some people in the office. So our flexible spaces are the other thing that we're looking at. How can you create spaces that you're not encouraging people to gather together? And again, on the distance, when you're looking at your meeting rooms, consider removing every other chair, having less than 10 people in a space. When you're looking at a type of conference room like we're showing in this image here, that would obviously be far too many people together. So how can you start to look at what is the appropriate amount of people in that space? So spread out that collaboration seating and encourage more of that virtual collaboration, as we were talking about with Teams and Zoom. Unassigned seating, this is another thing that had become really popular over the last number of years. So hoteling stations, hotspots, a lot of co-work spaces, that may not be as possible going forward. When you're looking at those things, either having those so you can maintain a schedule so you can disinfect and clean in between, or really looking at creating more of an assigned space. So that's something that's really, I think, going to change within how we think about spaces, and those hotspots are going to have to change how we think about them. Tech sharing is another thing. How can you, if people are sharing technology, how can you build in time to clean it in between, or have the technology be completely mobile so that people are just bringing their own devices in and having the space be cleaned in between? Signage is another big thing when we start to look at how people are using space. And this is a real opportunity when we start to look at how we communicate what our expectations are as companies. So the messaging around it, the language we're using is really important. And the graphic and the visuals is another opportunity. So, when we're talking about how the signs come together, really creating that idea of it being a collective thing, that we're all in this together. There's a lot of stress that has happened that we've seen in the workforces around the whole pandemic and what that means for people. So when we're putting these visuals into spaces, not having the, big red stop signs and X, do not stand here, but how can we soften that but still communicate it? And it's also an opportunity to brand. I've shown a couple images. What we did, we sort of played with our logo in the office and started to use that as an opportunity to build that into our spaces and to communicate a message, to encourage the hand washing, to have the directional signage throughout the space, but in a way that you can have that feel that it's part of your environment, part of your brand. Touchless materials or touchless environments and materiality are another huge thing that we're going to see more and more of. So already likely you're seeing touchless faucets, things like that have been around for years, but more into the automated window shades. How can we reduce the amount of touch points in our workspaces so that people aren't always touching the same elements together, and you can reduce that necessity to sanitize if things are automated. So there's a lot of different things that are being developed around that right now, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. So whether it's motion censored or voice activated, you can see how people are using their sort of smart home tools within their home spaces. So whether you're using Alexa to turn off your lights or things like that, I think we're going to see more of that coming into the office environment as well. And then your materiality, there are things that we are going to be cleaning more. I think that's something that's very much at the forefront of people's minds right now. And just understanding the materials, understanding what the materials or what the cleaning solutions you need to kill this particular virus or other viruses. And that it doesn't always necessarily have to be bleach. There are different levels of sort of cleaning solution that are going to be appropriate, and they're going to respond differently to the materials in the space. So having things that are easy to wipe down, that's going to be critical. But I think more of an understanding around the materials that are in your space and how you are expected to clean them will be key, because some materials will stand up really well and other ones won't. And so having those conversations around the material in your space is really important. Workspace planning. So this is just a bit of a diagram, and this is a floor plan and something that we are used to looking at on a regular basis. But Technion did some good thinking in terms of how these things are coming together. So providing a variety of spaces for the video conferencing, because we are going to see more of this hybrid work from home and collaborating with people rather than always getting together in the physical way. Reducing your guest seating is another critical thing. Increasing the height of the panels on the screen. So how can we create physical barriers that are going to prevent the potential transmission through the air? Planning workstations back to back. So actually looking at how you are configuring your workspace. So how can you have people potentially facing away from each other where they were used to face together? Reducing the occupancy. So sometimes that's, again, through your signage, indicating to people, the safe number of people for this particular space is maybe only 2 people or 4 people, where you might have had, 10 or 12 there previously. Your lounge areas, how can you start to have more single seats as opposed to sofas? We're seeing this, we do a lot of education design. So as we're starting to think about classrooms where you might have had desks where you have 2 students sitting together, all of those are going to be individual. So it really is permeating through all of our thinking around whether it's work environments or learning environments. And then obviously sanitization stations. How can you have those things visible, readily accessible throughout your space, obviously at your entrances, but also at key areas that are more public or communal spaces within your offices. And then providing choice. As Stacey was discussing, there's a lot of new habits that have come from working from home, and those barriers have been removed. So how can you actually create a space where people have choice? And I think addressing that some people are going to be more comfortable coming back into the office. Others are really going to prefer to continue working from home, whether it's from their own health perspective or being concerned about the health of other people within their households. Providing that choice and the flexibility and creating a seamless environment where it is, some virtual collaboration, some in-office collaboration, and then where you're choosing to do your focused work, I think will be really important. And then the physical and psychological well-being. Again, Stacey talked a little bit about this as well. The biophilic design, how you are having those natural materials, it really does change how you sort of show up. It changes your perception of your day, of your space, when you have natural materials, whether that's wood, a window with a view to the outside, or whether that's just an image of the exterior. It changes how our brains function. It actually makes us feel safer, more at ease, and actually just more ready to work. So those things are really important as we start to look at how can we put people at ease as people come back into the office environments. The warm finishes, it changes how you feel when you come into a space. And then obviously access to the natural light and fresh air. Those all contribute to people feeling ready and safe to work in the space. And so the future of office space, what does this really start to mean? It's our office spaces, I think, are going to become more flexible, more fluid. They're going to be places that are more about collaboration. They're going to be centers of our community and our culture for our companies, and might not just be spaces that you come in to do your work. Because we've created such a good environment to work from home in many cases, you're going to want to have your workspace be something that, it's got to be worth the commute. What are you finding in that physical office space that you aren't getting from being able to work from home and having that dynamic virtual collaboration? Because I think at the end of the day, people really miss people. I think that's been one of the biggest takeaways from all of this, is that we really miss collaborating with people in person. As much as the video conference has given us the ability to connect in different ways and eliminated, barriers of whether it's a commute or travel distance or finding that parking stall, we really do miss coming together. So that's really, I think, where our workspaces are going to become spaces where we can gather together safely. So putting in those measures around how many people can be in a space and creating an environment that people are comfortable, but you have that ability to work together when you want to. So really having that hybrid environment. I don't know, Stacey, do you have anything you want to comment on that piece? And I'll get into some of the other physical things we can do with the furniture.
I think a couple of times Leanne has mentioned about employees feeling safe, and the things like unaddressed workstations. So just really quickly, I think some early assumptions were that the workplace was going to go back to these really high private cubicles and get rid of all these collaborative areas. But the research that's coming out is actually indicating that that's not the case. While we might see some heights of panels and screens or barriers be added to give a little bit of a protection in between workers, I think that reduced density is going to mean that there's just needs to be more focus on those collaborative areas. Because that is really the only reason we're seeing to go to the office, is to be able to collaborate and work with each other. And the feeling safe thing about supporting the work from home policies again. If you can support that work from home environment, definitely I think giving people that choice is going to be paramount to retaining your staff.
Yeah, and so adapted workspace planning, some of the Technion furniture modules, and they've actually put together what you can do within your existing spaces to potentially adapt. We don't want to necessarily see going back to the old style, what we would call government cubicles that were going almost 7 feet up, that were really like offices made out of panels. Over the last number of years, we've really seen that barrier come down to really facilitate collaborative workspaces. But how can you actually work in an open office with those lower barriers and still create an environment that is safe? So some of those physical barriers are going to, I think we are going to see some of that starting to happen. Just again, for people to have that, both the physical barrier, but also the feeling of that psychological piece where I am safe. A lot of it is really around how can I feel at ease and have that perception of security around me as well. So there's some great elements, whether they're glass, you can really see how spaces can start to be quickly adapted. Whether you're, there's many different types of furniture configurations that might have been, but you can see in the before, and then just a simple addition of some glass barriers maintains that transparency, but does provide a physical barrier between people. So just a few examples of that. I don't know, Stacey, do you want to add any further thoughts to that? There's many different ways and some really creative pieces that have been created, I think, from Technion and others to adapt to these workspaces.
Yeah, I think, as well as adding physical barriers to something that was obviously maybe a hoteling solution, or for somebody who was already a remote worker and only in the office a few hours a day, to make it safer, is adding things like a sanitizing station, or giving people a little mobile, as opposed to a cart. Maybe there's a mobile cart or a little bin where they have their own sanitizing supplies. So if you have those spots in your space right now, we realize not everybody's going to be able to just completely reconfigure their workspace, but making sure that, as well as your regular cleaning maintenance, that the person has control over sanitizing their space. So they have their little bin or a little trolley or something where there's sanitizing supplies that are handy, and it's perfectly acceptable, I think, for them to come and sanitize their desk before they sit down, even if your cleaners have been through. And that, again, has both the health and safety aspect of it, but the psychological well-being aspect of it as well.
Yeah. And these are some of the open space solutions as well that are being looked at. So again, how can you create a little bit of that space when you are wanting people to collaborate in areas? And some of those physical barriers are really beneficial for that. And I think that's it. I think we're ready for questions if there are any.
Sorry, didn't realize I was muted there. Josie, are you still there?
I am still here. I'll just let some of these questions roll in. If you do have any questions, we'll give you just a minute to write them in the chat box there.
Yeah, or if somebody wants to, if somebody wants to share what worked or didn't work for them, that's always great information as well.
Okay, just while we're waiting for those here, we'll just say thank you to both of you for presenting today and sharing your knowledge with us on working from home. I know we've all kind of adjusted to this new environment, and it's great to have some tips on how we can make our home office a lot better. And for everyone who's joined us today, this webinar is recorded, and it will be available for viewing on our website by the end of the day today. So you can always check back there if you're wanting to review some of the content from today's webinar. Otherwise, it looks like there are no questions, so I will let you all go. Our next webinar is scheduled for next Wednesday, and it's all about content calendars and social media. So registration for that is open on our website right now, so feel free to register for that if that's a topic that interests you. Otherwise, yeah, no more questions. Okay, well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.